Hello, everybody. Tamara here on this Wednesday. I got to tell you, I am having a fantastic day, and I hope you are too. I actually started my morning doing a 17-minute keynote for a group of women around the world who sell this certain product. And it was just fascinating to me to see them interact and engage. They do these daily kind of motivational Zoom calls, and there were women from all over the globe. It was absolutely wonderful. It was just such a great example of a company taking care of its people and bringing them together and giving them tools and tips to succeed. So that's how I started my morning, was with this group of women from around the globe for a 17-minute keynote. I'm not sure I've ever talked so little in my life. It was great. It was amazing. Forced me to be concise. We all know sometimes I go off the rails. All right. Thank you for joining me for today's Burst of Innovation. Today, I want to talk about how failure is important for innovation. And there's really two ways that we can take this. I want to take it from a very tactical perspective, and then I want to take it from a more mindset perspective as well. I think both are important. So I'm going to start with the tactical, and then I'm going to go into the mindset, because I think there's a little bit more nuance to that. And I think failure is one of those very loaded words and topics that often carries a lot of baggage with it. And, you know, I've spent 25 plus years in innovation, and I often hear from leaders like, we love failure. We need to fail fast. Failure is important. But I don't always see that translate into what actually happens on the ground, what actually is happening in the office. I know a lot of people who would say, my company says failure is important and matters, but when it comes to actually having a failure, they either brush it under the rug, or there are negative consequences for it, or it's really not something that's valued here. So I want to share some examples with you of products that came out of failure. All they were was repurposed a little to find their success. And then, like I said, I want to talk about the mindset as well. But here's my question for you, for those of you watching, and later on when you watch the replay, I've got a two-layer question for you. Let's go all in. How do you perceive failure? And then how would you say your organization perceives failure? Because let's face it, they're oftentimes not the same thing. So how do you perceive it? What's your thoughts on the word failure? And how does that really play out in your organization and with your team? Like I said, I think failure, oftentimes I see when I go into companies, there's a lot of talk about how important it is, but not a lot of action to support that, as well as not a lot of processes to help failure happen in a way that actually fosters learning and growth and doesn't just shut things down. So how is failure perceived from your perspective, and how do you think it plays out in your organization? Let me take a quick sip of coffee. Can't have 3 cups without getting me going. Okay, so here's one of the things that I found in an organization that I used to work with. So the leader would come out to a town hall meeting and they'd say, we have to fail fast. If we're going to innovate, we have to fail. If we're going to take risks, if we're going to succeed, we have to fail fast. And then when we tried to do it, the processes would constantly slow us down, right? And force us to kind of get more certainty, more data, more confirmation. So on one hand, the lip service was around failure, yet on the other, the processes were actually keeping us from innovating. So there's kind of this odd love-hate. So again, let me talk about the 2 examples that I want to share with you that I think are great examples of how failure can actually lead to success. And I'm hoping for you, they spark a little ideas. And my children who are in the background are going to be a lot more quiet while I'm live. Thanks, guys. Not doing. Thank you. Yeah, we're all home today, schooling and working. Okay, so did you hear them all in the background there? Can you hear all the crumpling in the kitchen? My office isn't too far from it. All right, so here are 2 examples that I want to share with you where failure led to unbelievable success that you would never know the product came out of failure. So the first one is, hold on, let me find mine. Give me a second. Post-it note. So here's the thing about the Post-it note. And I talk a little bit about how he sold the Post-it note in, but there's actually a layer before that. This adhesive was actually a failure. So this adhesive was supposed to be an industrial strength adhesive, and it didn't work. It was considered a failure. They were going to shut down the project because they couldn't get this adhesive to be as strong as they wanted it to be. Turns out Art Fry, who's the inventor of the Post-it note, who was working on the project, was actually in a pew in church one day and was thinking to himself, I really wish I could mark pages in my Bible, but not actually ruin it. Well, then he realized, oh yeah, the Post-it note. So I think that's a great example of something that everybody else saw as a failure. It just took one person to see it a little bit differently. One person to go, hey, wait a minute, it didn't work over here, but maybe there's an application over here. Sometimes that failure, the thing that didn't work, all we need to do is repurpose it. Well, what are other uses for this thing that didn't work over here? We have, what I've discovered when I go into companies and I do innovation projects, so oftentimes I get hired to come in and help them develop new product ideas, new pipelines, new revenue streams, figure out new customer markets. Oftentimes, what I find where the best innovation comes from is actually digging through the closets of all the failed ideas that never got implemented and figuring out what in there is gold. Some of it is gold. It just has to be repurposed in a different way. It's one of my favorite things to do because you find these gems that people said, oh, that didn't work. That was a failure, right? We tried to do that product and it didn't work. Well, yeah, it failed in the way you anticipated it or wanted it or expected it, but there may be another purpose. So failed adhesive that wasn't strong enough to do what they wanted to do turned into the Post-it note. Here's another great story for you that I think I talk about in my book, Innovation is Everybody's Business. It's one behind me. So there were two brothers. They're up in the Dakotas, and they own a car dealership that sold hub cars. Now, you may not remember these, but these were 7-passenger cars. And they're thinking, we're in the best location. Every day we see the big mining up there, right? So every day they see the miners walk to the mine 4 miles, 5 miles to the mine and back. So they don't have transportation. They don't make enough to buy like a luxury. Cars at that time were not in an affordable level. So they're thinking, oh, this is perfect. We've got these people who are walking by every day. They need cars. We've got a hubmobile. So every day they're walking back and forth. And every day the brothers are watching these miners who should be their customers walk back and forth. And guess what? Not one of them is buying the cars. Nobody wants them. So now the brothers are on the edge of bankruptcy and they're going, well, what are we going to do? We've got these cars, we've got a dealership, we've got all this inventory and nobody's buying. Didn't matter what marketing they did, what language they used. One of the brothers turned to the other and said, we failed. And then the other brother said something brilliant. He said, what if we rented them out? So the failure was trying to sell these cars to a market that couldn't afford them, didn't want them. Then they repurposed that failure into a rental. And guess what that became? Does anybody know what it is? Let me take a sip. If you have, put in the chat bar. I've yet to have someone know what that turned into. I'll be so impressed if you do. Okay. That turned into Greyhound bus. Now, I know Greyhound's got some other issues now, but let's go back in time to when they started. They were a wild success, but that success came out of failure. So here they are with this incredibly failing car dealership, and then that failure turned into a rental business. So reason failure is important to innovation isn't just because of the obvious ones of, you got to try, you got to experiment. If you're not failing, you're not taking risks. All of that. Oh, you said U-Haul. Oh, you were close. Greyhounds. All of that is true. But what I think also matters is if you take a look at whatever it is that failed, whatever thing, whether that's a product, a service, a process, whatever, and look at it from a different lens and actually repurpose it, you can actually find the success and find the innovation in it. The last project I was on, I was digging through all their failed innovation efforts. And I can't talk about it yet because it's not back in the market yet, but they had pulled something off the market. And when I pulled it back out and we had this discussion around, wait a minute, what if instead of using this product this way, what if we turned it around and used it this way? The light bulbs went off in the room, and they're going to relaunch it, new packaging, new marketing, new purpose for the product. Innovation is important to failure because oftentimes the things that we think are failures are just being used in the wrong way. The sticky note adhesive, it failed because it wasn't industrial enough, but it turned into the sticky note. A failed car dealership, nobody wanted to buy the cars, turned into Greyhound bus company. So innovation is important to failure because all those failures are actually opportunities to innovate in new and different ways. And I'm curious, for you watching out there, do you have innovations or failures in your world that you think, if I just looked at this a little bit of a different way, there's probably an opportunity here. So if that's you, I want you to give me a yes or a heck yes, or I'm going to start digging today, Tamara. I want you to give me that in the comment section and let me know that you are going to look at all those failures. It is a great thing to do. And here's the other thing, by the way. I also find that if you and your team, this is a great exercise to do. If you and your team decide to dig in through all the failures over time, your team or your company, whatever, have in their failure closet, or failure shelf, as I like to call it, you'll also learn a ton of lessons that you didn't think about before. So maybe you don't find that nugget of gold that you're going to bring back to market, but you'll find lessons that will apply today. All right, let me just say, for better or worse, failure for me has a historically negative, connotation. This was to my first question about how you perceive failure. As a financial professional, I wonder if our need to get the numbers right for the first, future perspective. Yeah. So, Paul, that's a great point. And I would say, yes, I think actually most of us in most fields see failure, as a negative. You're not alone in that. And especially in fields where we need to get things right. There is a need to get things right. But that shouldn't cloud how we feel about trying things and having them not work. And what does it say? Let me see. Yeah, right. E-ink, not fast enough for active screen, became Kindle. Right. Oh, God, that's a good one. I hadn't even realized that one. Thank you for sharing that. That's another great example. So as you can see, things that are failure in one place turn out to be wild successes in another. I think we all have failure shelves full of stuff that if we actually looked at again, we'd say, oh, turns out that does work. That is actually innovation. So the second thing, and Paul, this goes to a little bit about what you were alluding to, is I want to talk a little bit about the mindset of failure. And here's the thing, I actually don't love to use the word failure. It's not because I think that everything works and nothing doesn't work, but I think it's an iterative process. And instead of looking at things as failure, I think we have to look at things as outcomes. And it either gave us this outcome or it gave us that outcome. And if it gave us this outcome, which worked, what worked and how do we build on the strength? If it gave us this outcome, which didn't work, why didn't it work? And how do we improve that? How do we change it? How do we stop it? Sometimes things should be stopped, and that's okay, but that doesn't make it a failure. I think the decision to shelve something is as positive as the decision to move forward with something. And we've got to change our mindset out of failure being this end-all be-all negative and impacts everything to an outcome mindset that is all about experimentation. As you know, I talk about that a lot. And really allows us to look at things more objectively than just it either worked or it didn't work. Hold on, I should go back. Doesn't note-taking help tomorrow? Revisiting meetings, discussions, give lessons. Older clients, notes stored helps. Yeah, so there's kind of two layers. So thank you for bringing this up. So there's two layers to that. So first of all, yes, I love to capture, look, I love to capture everything. So, and I'm often going back through my notes to see what I thought about something, what I wrote about it, what I said I would do, like all of that, and to see the team notes. Here's the other reason your colleagues' notes are important, by the way, because you said older client notes as well. It helps you see where you might have bottlenecks and where you might have opportunities because you see things from their perspective as well. Now, notes you're reading it through your lens and they wrote it through their lens. But yes, so To that point, one of the things so I was talking earlier about how I love to dig through the failure closet and find like all the projects that never happened. A lot of those end up being PowerPoint presentations. We call them decks that other consultants, junior consultants, clients, whoever put together to present ideas. So there's a lot of information in there that helps me sift through. It's not just, all right, Tamara, here's the idea for the iPhone. It's a whole PowerPoint presentation on the consumer, on the needs, on what they learned, on how the idea would be brought to market. So I have this incredible wealth of knowledge. And then I also have the benefit of new lens and new perspective to put on it. I want to go back to the Greyhound bus for a second, because I think that is a brilliant example of not being tied to how something should or shouldn't look. I think oftentimes we get stuck in failure versus success mode because we have this expectation in our head, and that expectation was disappointed. It didn't happen that way. So when it doesn't happen that way, we call it a failure. Well, if those two brothers had said, well, we started a car dealership and we failed at a car dealership, they wouldn't have transitioned to Greyhound bus. They wouldn't have transitioned to a rental business, which is drastically different than the business they started. So I think with failure, we have to be okay with a massive shift, a small pivot, or a stopping of something and saying, you know what, we're not going to do this right now. So failure is important to innovation because A, what failed in one way could be a success in another. And B, it's what gives us the opportunity to grow and learn and evolve. And I really encourage all of us, and if you're on this, you're probably there already, but I would really encourage all of us to not see the word failure as a bad thing. And I don't avoid using it because I'm trying to be rose-colored glasses. I avoid using it because I just don't see it that way. It's an outcome. And believe me, I have had many outcomes that didn't work. So I'm not saying that everything I do is a wild success. I've learned a lot of hard knock lessons over the year, a lot of them. Maybe if you're interested one day, I'll do a whole thing on that, of all the mistakes I've made and how it's taught me things and how that has led to me stopping things, pivoting things, shifting things for myself, for my clients. But that it's a mindset followed by an action. Like I said, if you're a leader out there, I would really encourage you to think about, if I'm saying I love failure, am I really giving my team the process, the room, the support to actually put that into action? It's one thing to really maybe personally be okay with it. It's another for the processes, the flows, all of that to actually allow that to happen. Like the example I was giving, our leader said, fail fast. So we took that to heart. We started experimenting and learning. And then the system forced us to slow down because we kept getting pushback that forced us to go kind of get more hypothetical data to slow down the process. So on one hand, we were being told to fail fast. And I think they wanted that, by the way. I don't think they were talking out of both sides of their mouth. I think they truly wanted to fail fast. But what they didn't recognize is that the processes and the actions that they were doing did not match that. All right. If you have any comments before we close out, please put them in the comment section so I can respond. You know, I love it. I love to respond to you in the comments. Thank you for putting up with my I have two teenage boys, and we're all in a very confined space right now. So it's sometimes we're a little louder than others. And sometimes I think to a teenage boy, quiet means like, I'll just cook up some bacon and and my office happens to be close to off the kitchen. So thank you for putting up with that. Hopefully this gives you some insight into maybe how you're viewing failure. And Paul, to your comment earlier, really think about, is the need to be right in this one area, you want your numbers to be right, clouding how you move forward in other areas. It's okay to have to be right there, but that shouldn't cloud everything else. All right. With that, I thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for moving the needle forward with me. Thank you for innovating, especially during stressful times. This is the best time to innovate, as you know. We just have to kind of embrace it. So appreciate you. Thank you. Paul just said, I think learning from other people's failures. Hold on. We are trying to turn the corner on setting failure as learning. Yeah. And that, to me, that's a lot about having an outcome conversation and not a failure versus success conversation. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're welcome, Carolyn. Good to see you. Oh, wait, I put up the wrong one. Good to see you, Carolyn. You're welcome. Failure is experience, so it's about learning from it. Yeah, you know what? That's a great way to say it. Failure is experience. I think you also said here, I think learning from others' failure is something to be leveraged as well. Agreed. Totally agree. I think we can learn a lot from each other. And if I've made a mistake that you can avoid or learn from, I would want to share that. So, yeah, you're all right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Let me get that back off. There we go. All right. Thank you all for being here. That was your 10-ish minute burst of innovation. I kept it to 20 today. And I will see you on Monday. And hey, if you have any topics or questions that you want me to explore, let me know.